I was standing on the deck of my 70-foot Sunseeker yacht when I saw her marching down the dock like she owned the place, clipboard clutched in her manicured fingers, and a scowl that could curdle milk. The morning sun reflecting off Tampa Bay's waters was too beautiful for this kind of interruption. But Sharon Whitmore, president of the Bayshore Heights Homeowners Association, had never been one to let beauty or common sense get in the way of her self-appointed mission to make everyone's life miserable. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut through the sound of waves lapping against the hull. "Are you Yannick Ellis?" I set down my coffee and turned to face her, already knowing this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. Sharon was wearing what I'd come to think of as her uniform. A pastel pink blazer that probably cost more than most people's car payments, pearls that looked real but weren't, and an expression of perpetual disapproval that seemed permanently etched into her features. "That's me," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "What can I do for you?" She thrust a stack of papers toward me, not bothering to come aboard. "These are official notices from the Bayshore Heights HOA. You have failed to pay your homeowner association dues for the past 6 months, totaling $4,800. As per the covenants and restrictions you agreed to when you purchased your property, we are authorized to place a lien on your assets." I took the papers from her hand and flipped through them. Sure enough, there were multiple notices, warnings, and finally what looked like a legal document claiming the HOA had the right to seize my yacht to cover the unpaid dues. I couldn't help but laugh, which only made Sharon's scowl deepen. "You think this is funny, Mr. Ellis? The HOA has rules for a reason. Everyone must pay their fair share to maintain our community standards." "Sharon," I said, trying to keep the amusement out of my voice, "I'm not laughing at the dues. I'm laughing because you think you can seize my yacht." "It's right there in black and white," she snapped. "Florida law allows homeowners associations to place liens on property and assets when dues remain unpaid. Your yacht is moored here. It's registered to your address in Bayshore Heights, and therefore it falls under our jurisdiction." I took a long sip of my coffee, letting her stew for a moment. The thing about Sharon Whitmore was that she'd spent the last 3 years as HOA president running Bayshore Heights like her personal fiefdom. She'd fined people for having the wrong shade of white on their mailboxes, sent violation notices for trash cans visible from the street at 7 in the morning on collection day, and had even tried to ban one neighbor's therapy dog because it was 3 pounds over the weight limit specified in the pet policy. "Sharon, do you know who owns this marina?" I asked. She blinked, momentarily thrown off her script. "What does that have to do with anything? Humor me." "I assume it's owned by some corporation. All marinas are corporate-owned." "Now, about these dues, it's owned by Ellis Maritime Properties, LLC, I interrupted. "Which is my company. I own this marina, Sharon. All 52 slips, the fuel dock, the ship store, the restaurant over there, and the parking lot you walked through to get here." The color drained from her face, then rushed back in an angry red flush. "That's irrelevant. Your home is in Bayshore Heights and you owe the association money. The location of your yacht doesn't matter." "Actually, it matters quite a bit," I said. "Because while you were busy drafting up these cute little seizure notices, you might have forgotten something important. Every single member of your HOA board lives in Bayshore Heights, right?" "Of course we do. Only residents can serve on the board. And 7 of your board members keep their boats here at my marina. Including you, Sharon. That's your 32-foot Sea Ray in slip 18, isn't it?" Her eyes narrowed. "What's your point?" "My point is that you just threatened to seize my property. So I'm going to give you 24 hours to tear up these papers, apologize, and never speak of this again. If you don't, I'll be terminating the Marina lease agreements for every single HOA board member. You'll have 1 week to remove your boats from my property." Sharon's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "You can't do that." "I absolutely can. Check your lease agreement. Section 7, paragraph 3. I can terminate any lease with 30 days' notice for any reason, or 7 days' notice if I deem the lessee to be acting in a manner detrimental to marina operations, and threatening the marina owner definitely qualifies. This is extortion. No, this is business. You made a threat, and I'm responding to it. 24 hours, Sharon." She stood there sputtering for another moment before spinning on her heel and marching back down the dock, her heels clicking angrily against the wood. I watched her go, then pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. "Marcus, it's Yannick. I need you to pull up all the HOA lease agreements at the marina. Yes, today, because we might be about to have some vacancies." The next morning, I was in my office at the marina when my assistant Sarah knocked on the door. "You've got visitors," she said, her expression somewhere between worried and amused. "The whole HOA board, all of them, every single one. They're in the conference room and Sharon looks like she's about to have an aneurysm." I grabbed my coffee and headed down the hall. The conference room overlooked the marina, with floor-to-ceiling windows that provided a perfect view of all the boats gently bobbing in their slips. "Good morning," I said, taking a seat across from them. "I assume you're here to discuss my offer." Sharon's knuckles were white where she gripped her pen. "Your ultimatum, you mean. Call it what you want. Have you made a decision?" Douglas cleared his throat. "Mr. Ellis, we understand there's been some tension, but we need to discuss this reasonably. The HOA has a responsibility to collect dues from all residents. We can't simply waive them because someone gets upset." "I'm not asking you to waive them," I said. "I'm asking you to drop this ridiculous attempt to seize my yacht. There's a big difference." Linda leaned forward. "But you do owe the dues. You haven't paid in 6 months." "You're right, I haven't. Would you like to know why?" The board members exchanged glances. Sharon spoke up, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Please, enlighten us." I pulled out my own folder and slid it across the table. "Those are copies of every payment I've made to the Bayshore Heights HOA for the past 3 years. Check November of last year. I paid my annual dues in full 12 months in advance, as I've done every year since I bought my house in 2019. Timothy, the accountant, grabbed the folder and started flipping through pages. His expression shifted from skepticism to confusion to concern. "These are copies of canceled checks and bank statements showing the withdrawals." "Keep looking," I said. "You'll find the receipt from the HOA office signed by Sharon herself, acknowledging receipt of my payment for the full year." The blood drained from Sharon's face. "That's not possible." "I never—" "November 14th, 2024, I continued. "I paid $4,800 to cover my dues through November 2025, which means I'm not behind. I'm actually paid up for another 4 months. Linda grabbed the papers from Timothy and examined them herself. "Sharon, did you record this payment?" "I must have forgotten to enter it into the system," Sharon said quickly. "It was an honest mistake. We processed dozens of payments. You sent me 6 months of late notices," I interrupted. "You filed legal paperwork claiming I was delinquent. You threatened to seize my boat. That's not an honest mistake, Sharon. That's either gross incompetence or deliberate harassment." Robert Chen, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. "Why would Sharon target you specifically?" "That's a good question," I said. "Why don't we ask her about the violation notice she sent me last year? The one claiming my lawn was a 1/4 inch too long. We have standards," Sharon began. "Or the fine for my trash cans being visible from the street at 6:30 in the morning on trash day. when collection doesn't start until 7. Or the complaint about my house numbers being the wrong font, even though I installed the exact font specified in the HOA guidelines. Should I go on? Patricia Summers pursed her lips. Those do seem rather petty. Petty is one word for it, I said. Harassment is another, and you know what? I was willing to let it all slide. I paid the stupid fines. I cut my grass more frequently. I made sure my trash cans were invisible until the last possible second. But coming after my yacht, that crossed a line. Douglas held up his hands. Clearly there's been a misunderstanding. If you've paid your dues, then of course we'll withdraw the lien proceedings. We can resolve this right now. Oh, we're past that point, I said calmly. Sharon had 24 hours to make this right. That deadline passed at 9 this morning. It's now 10:15. Sharon shot to her feet. You can't throw us out of the Marina. Our leases are valid contracts. Were valid contracts, I corrected. As of 9 o'clock this morning, I initiated termination proceedings for all 7 board member leases. You have 7 days to remove your vessels from the premises. The room erupted in protests. Melissa Hartford, who'd been tapping on her phone the entire meeting, finally looked up. This is insane. Where are we supposed to take our boats on 7 days' notice? Every marina in Tampa Bay has a waiting list. That's not my problem, I said. You should have thought about that before your president decided to wage a personal vendetta against me. Timothy shuffled his papers nervously. Mr. Ellis, I understand you're angry, but surely we can come to some arrangement. Most of us had nothing to do with this situation. Then you should have done a better job overseeing your president, I replied. How many of you knew about the lien proceedings before today? Silence fell over the room. Finally, Linda raised her hand. Sharon sent us an email about it last week. She said it was a routine collection matter. And none of you thought to verify that before authorizing legal action, Robert shifted uncomfortably. Sharon handles most of the day-to-day financial matters. We trusted her judgment. That trust was clearly misplaced, I said. Let me tell you what's going to happen now. You're going to go back to Bayshore Heights and hold an emergency board meeting. You're going to review every single financial transaction Sharon has processed for the past year, and I'm willing to bet you're going to find some interesting discrepancies. Sharon's face went pale. How dare you accuse me of? I'm not accusing you of anything, I said. I'm suggesting your board do their due diligence. If everything is above board, you have nothing to worry about. But if I'm right, and you've been cooking the books or targeting residents for personal reasons, then you've got a much bigger problem than losing your boat slip. Douglas stood up slowly. I think we need to have a private discussion as a board. Mr. Ellis, would you give us the room for a moment? Take all the time you need, I said, heading for the door. But the eviction notices stand. You've got 7 days. I went back to my office and tried to focus on actual work. The Marina had been my passion project for the past 5 years. After selling my tech startup in 2018 for an amount that meant I'd never have to work again, I'd moved to Tampa and bought a house in Bayshore Heights because it was close to the water. But the neighborhood itself felt too uptight, too controlled. So I'd started looking for investment opportunities that would keep me close to what I loved, boats and the ocean. The Harborview Marina had been struggling when I bought it. The previous owner had let maintenance slide. The facilities were outdated, and they were hemorrhaging tenants to newer, flashier marinas. I'd poured $2 million into renovations, upgraded all the electrical and plumbing, added a state-of-the-art fuel system, and built a new clubhouse with a restaurant that actually served decent food. Within a year, we had a waiting list. The irony of the HOA board members having boats here wasn't lost on me. They'd all joined after the renovations, when Harborview became the place to keep your boat in Tampa Bay. And now, they were about to learn a valuable lesson about not biting the hand that feeds you. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "They're asking to speak with you again." I headed back to the conference room. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Sharon sat with her arms crossed, glaring at everyone. The other 6 board members looked various shades of uncomfortable. Douglas spoke first. "Mr. Ellis, we'd like to propose a solution. We're going to conduct a full audit of the HOA finances, as you suggested. If we find any irregularities, we'll take appropriate action. In exchange, we're hoping you'll reconsider the evictions." "What kind of appropriate action?" I asked. Linda answered. "If Sharon has been mishandling funds or targeting residents inappropriately, she'll be removed as president and from the board entirely. We'll also issue a formal apology to you and any other residents who have been similarly treated." "And the lien proceedings?" "Withdrawn immediately," Timothy said. "We'll file the paperwork today. Your record will show you're paid in full through November, as you should be." I studied their faces. They all looked sincere, except for Sharon, who looked like she wanted to set me on fire with her mind. "I want the audit completed by an independent third party, not someone connected to the HOA or any board member." "Agreed," Douglas said. "And I want weekly updates on the findings." "We can do that. Fine. I'll put the evictions on hold. But if this audit doesn't happen, or if it gets swept under the rug, or if Sharon tries anything else, those notices go back into effect immediately. And next time, there won't be any negotiation." Relief flooded several faces around the table. Sharon, however, stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. I've served this community faithfully for 3 years. I've given up countless hours of my time, dealt with petty complaints and entitled residents, all while maintaining our property values and community standards. And this is the thanks I get. Being treated like a criminal because of one small bookkeeping error." "Sharon," Patricia said quietly, "I think it's best if you let us handle things from here." "Don't patronize me, Patricia. You've all turned on me because this man threatened your precious boats. You're cowards." "Or maybe," Robert said, his voice harder than I'd heard it all morning, "we're finally seeing what several residents have been trying to tell us for months. You've been sending violation notices to the Martinez family about their rose garden, even though roses are explicitly allowed in the guidelines. You fined the Hendersons 3 times for parking their RV on their own property, even though it was behind their fence and not visible from the street. And you tried to force Mrs. Chen to get rid of her butterfly garden because you claimed it was untidy. Property values," Sharon began, "have gone up despite your efforts, not because of them," Robert interrupted. "My mother has lived in fear of you for the past year, Sharon. She's 83 years old, and she was so stressed about your constant harassment that her doctor had to put her on anxiety medication. I didn't connect the dots until now, but yeah, I think an audit is an excellent idea." Sharon grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "Fine. Audit away. You won't find anything because there's nothing to find. I'm done with all of you." She slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The remaining board members sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. "That went well," Melissa finally said. Douglas rubbed his temples. "Mr. Ellis, I apologize. We should have been more diligent in our oversight. This is our responsibility as much as Sharon's." "I appreciate that," I said. "For what it's worth, I don't think all of you are bad people, but HOAs can become toxic really quickly when there's no accountability. Sharon had too much power and not enough supervision." "We'll fix that," Linda promised. "New financial controls, monthly reporting requirements, and a rotation of the president position. This won't happen again." "I'll hold you to that," I said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a Marina to run." The next few days were relatively quiet. The audit was scheduled to begin the following Monday with a forensic accountant from a reputable Tampa firm. I'd actually started to think the whole mess might resolve itself peacefully. Then I got home from the Marina on Thursday evening to find my front door standing open. I approached carefully, pulling out my phone to call the police, but then I heard crashing sounds from inside. Someone was trashing my house. I dialed 911 and stayed outside, watching through the window as a figure moved through my living room, knocking over lamps and sweeping books off shelves. The Hillsborough County Sheriff's deputies arrived within minutes. 2 officers approached the house while I stayed by my car, giving them my statement. More crashing sounds came from inside, followed by shouting, and then the deputies emerged with Sharon Whitmore in handcuffs. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and she was screaming about how I'd ruined her life and deserved everything I got. The deputies loaded her into their patrol car while another officer came over to take my detailed statement. "You know this woman?" the deputy asked. "Unfortunately. She's the president of my homeowners association. We've had some disputes lately. I'd say, she did a number on your living room. You'll want to document everything for insurance purposes." I went inside to assess the damage. Sharon had systematically destroyed everything she could get her hands on. My television was shattered, the couch slashed open with what looked like a kitchen knife, picture frames smashed, and she'd even poured out all my liquor bottles onto the carpet. The stench of mixed alcohol was overwhelming. In my office, she'd overturned my desk and thrown my computer against the wall. Papers were scattered everywhere, and she'd spray-painted "thief" across one wall in red paint. The kitchen was even worse, every dish pulled from the cabinets and smashed on the floor, the refrigerator emptied and its contents dumped everywhere. Cabinets torn off their hinges. The deputy who'd stayed to help me document everything let out a low whistle. "This is tens of thousands of dollars in damage, plus breaking and entering, criminal mischief, vandalism. She's looking at some serious charges." "How did she even get in?" I asked. "Looks like she broke the lock on your back door. There's scratch marks on it like she used a crowbar or something." I spent the next 3 hours photographing everything, giving statements and contacting my insurance company. By the time the deputies left, it was after midnight. I couldn't stay in the house. The alcohol smell was too strong, and I didn't feel safe there anymore. I packed a bag and headed back to my yacht. The Marina was quiet at night, just the gentle sound of water and the occasional creak of boats against their moorings. I climbed aboard my Sunseeker, locked every door and hatch, and tried to process what had just happened. Sharon Whitmore had completely snapped. Whatever I'd thought this dispute was about, it had clearly gone much deeper for her. My phone rang at 8 the next morning. It was Douglas Pemberton. "Yannick, I just heard about last night. I'm so sorry. The board is meeting this morning for an emergency session. Sharon is being removed immediately, obviously. We're also planning to make a statement to the community." "That's great, Douglas, but Sharon is sitting in jail right now facing felony charges. This is way beyond HOA politics." I know. But there's something else. The forensic accountant started preliminary work yesterday, going through records we provided. He found irregularities immediately. "Yannick, Sharon has been skimming money from the HOA for at least 2 years. I sat up straighter. "How much?" "We don't have final numbers yet, but initial estimates are around $70,000. She was creating fake vendor invoices for services that were never performed, then cutting checks to shell companies she controlled. She was also pocketing a portion of the dues collected in cash." Jesus. "It gets worse. Remember how she was claiming you hadn't paid your dues? She did that to at least 4 other residents, collected their payments, pocketed the money, then sent late notices. When people paid again to avoid penalties, she kept that money too. That's embezzlement. Yes, it is. We're contacting the state attorney's office this morning. Between the break-in at your house and the financial fraud, Sharon is going to prison. Good, I said flatly. She could have killed someone driving around that unhinged. The community is in shock. We're holding an open meeting tomorrow night to explain everything. I'd really appreciate it if you could be there. People need to hear your side of the story. I agreed, though I wasn't thrilled about the prospect of rehashing the whole mess in front of my neighbors. I'd moved to Bayshore Heights for peace and quiet, not drama. The rest of Friday was spent dealing with insurance adjusters and contractors. The damage to my house was estimated at just over $48,000. The insurance would cover most of it, but I'd still be displaced for at least 6 weeks while repairs were done. Saturday evening, I arrived at the Bayshore Heights Community Center for the open meeting. The parking lot was packed, with at least 100 residents crammed into a space meant for 60. Douglas had brought in extra chairs, but people still lined the walls. The mood was tense. I could see clusters of residents talking in hushed voices, casting occasional glances toward the front where the board sat. When Douglas called the meeting to order, the room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," he began. "I know there have been rumors circulating about recent events involving our HOA board, specifically our former president Sharon Whitmore. I want to address these directly and transparently." He proceeded to lay out everything: Sharon's embezzlement, the fake vendor invoices, the double collection of dues from multiple residents, and finally the break-in at my house. Gasps and angry murmurs rippled through the crowd as he spoke. "The board takes full responsibility for not catching this sooner," Douglas continued. "We failed in our oversight duties. We trusted Sharon to handle financial matters without adequate verification. That was a mistake, and we're implementing new controls immediately to ensure it never happens again." A hand shot up from the audience. It was Maria Martinez, whose rose garden Sharon had been targeting. "What about all the bogus violations she issued?" "I've paid over $2,000 in fines for things that weren't even violations. Do we get that money back? We're reviewing every violation notice issued in the past 3 years, Linda answered. Any that were unjustified will be refunded. We're also establishing an appeals process so residents can challenge violations they believe are unfair. Another resident stood. "What about the money she stole? Is the HOA going to replace that?" Timothy fielded this one. "The HOA has insurance that covers theft by board members. We've filed a claim, and we expect to recover the full amount. In the meantime, we have sufficient reserves to cover operating expenses." The questions continued for over an hour. People were angry, scared, and confused. Douglas finally asked me to come forward and explain my side of things. I gave them the abbreviated version: the unpaid dues that I'd actually paid, the lien proceedings, the threat to seize my yacht, and my connection to the Marina. "I want to be clear," I said. "I didn't evict the board members out of spite. I was protecting myself and my property from what I saw as harassment and overreach. When Sharon broke into my house and destroyed everything I owned, she proved that my concerns were justified. I'm glad the rest of the board has taken responsibility and is making changes. That's all any of us can ask for." An elderly woman in the front row spoke up. "Mr. Ellis, I'm Dorothy Chen. My son Robert is on the board. I want to thank you for standing up to Sharon. She made my life miserable for a year, and I was too afraid to fight back. You gave the rest of us courage to speak up." That drew a round of applause. I felt my face heat up. I hadn't been trying to be anybody's hero, I'd just been defending myself. But I could see the relief on people's faces, the sense that maybe things would actually get better now. The meeting wrapped up around 9. As people filed out, several residents stopped to shake my hand or thank me. The Henderson family, with their band RV, invited me to a barbecue. Maria Martinez hugged me and promised to bring me roses from her garden once they bloomed. Even people I'd never met came up to introduce themselves and welcome me properly to the neighborhood. Douglas pulled me aside as the crowd thinned. "You handled that well. I think we're going to come out of this stronger as a community." "I hope so," I said. "Has anyone heard from Sharon?" "She made bail yesterday afternoon. Her lawyer filed for a postponement on the criminal charges, so she's out for now. But between the felony breaking and entering, the vandalism, and the embezzlement charges, her attorney has his work cut out for him." "Keep me posted," I said. "And Douglas, thank you for taking this seriously. A lot of boards would have circled the wagons and tried to protect her." "I considered it for about 5 seconds," he admitted. "But Robert's mother was practically having panic attacks over Sharon's harassment. When I saw how many other people she'd hurt, I knew we had to act. Sometimes doing the right thing is more important than avoiding embarrassment." I drove back to the Marina feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe this whole nightmare would actually lead to positive changes. Maybe Bayshore Heights would become the kind of community I'd hoped for when I bought my house there. 2 weeks later, I was in the Marina office reviewing lease applications when Sarah knocked on the door with an odd expression on her face. "There's someone here to see you." She says she's Sharon Whitmore's attorney. I sat back in my chair. "Send her in." The woman who entered was in her mid-40s, professionally dressed in a dark suit, carrying a leather briefcase. She introduced herself as Nicole Patterson, criminal defense attorney. "Mr. Ellis, I'll get straight to the point. My client is facing some very serious charges. The embezzlement case alone could put her in prison for 10 years, and that's before we even address the breaking and entering and vandalism charges related to your property." "Okay," I said slowly. "What does that have to do with me?" "I'm hoping we can reach a settlement. My client is willing to plead guilty to the financial crimes and make full restitution to the HOA and to you personally. In exchange, we'd like you to consider not pursuing the charges related to the break-in." "Miss Patterson, those charges were filed by the state. The deputies arrested Sharon at the scene. I don't think I can just drop them. The state attorney's office is more likely to offer a favorable plea deal if the victim doesn't want to pursue maximum charges. Your testimony will be crucial. If you were willing to speak on her behalf, show some leniency." "No," I said flatly. Nicole Patterson blinked. "Mr. Ellis, please consider, your client terrorized me for over a year. She abused her position of power to harass me and other residents. She stole from the community. She tried to seize my property illegally. And when she couldn't get her way, she broke into my home and destroyed $48,000 worth of my belongings. Why on earth would I show her leniency?" "Because she's mentally ill," Nicole said quietly. "Sharon has been diagnosed with severe anxiety and obsessive-compulsive disorder. She was under tremendous stress trying to maintain what she saw as community standards. She had a breakdown." "That's very sad," I said, and I meant it. "But mental illness doesn't excuse criminal behavior. It explains it, but it doesn't make it okay. Sharon hurt people, real people with real lives. She stole Dorothy Chen's peace of mind. She took money from families who trusted her. She violated my home, the one place where anyone should feel safe. I'm sorry she's struggling, but she needs to face consequences for her actions." Nicole pressed her lips together. "Mr. Ellis, Sharon will likely go to prison for years. Her life is effectively over. Is that really what you want?" "What I want is for her to get help." Real psychological help, not just a diagnosis used as a legal strategy. And yes, I think she needs to be held accountable. Maybe prison isn't the right answer. I'm not a judge or a prosecutor, but I'm not going to ask them to go easy on her. She made her choices. Nicole stood, recognizing she wasn't going to get anywhere. I understand. For what it's worth, I do think Sharon is genuinely remorseful. She wrote you a letter. She pulled an envelope from her briefcase and set it on my desk. You don't have to read it if you don't want to. After she left, I stared at the envelope for a long time. Finally, I opened it. The letter was handwritten, 3 pages long. Sharon's normally perfect penmanship was shaky, the words sometimes hard to read. She talked about her childhood, growing up in a house where everything had to be perfect, or her father would rage. She described years of therapy that helped somewhat but never fully addressed her need for control. She explained how becoming HOA president had felt like finally having power over her environment, and how it had spiraled into obsession. She apologized. For the harassment, for the theft, for the break-in. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, but she wanted me to know that she knew what she'd done was wrong. She was entering a residential treatment facility for her mental health issues, regardless of how the legal proceedings went. The letter ended with a single line. I hope you can find peace, even if I can't. I read it 3 times, then filed it away. I did believe Sharon was sorry. I even believed she'd been suffering. But suffering didn't give someone the right to make others suffer. The residents of Bayshore Heights deserved better. Dorothy Chen deserved better. I deserved better. The legal process ground forward over the next several months. Sharon's attorney negotiated a plea deal. 8 years in prison for embezzlement, with credit for time served and possibility of parole after 5 years. The breaking and entering charges were reduced to criminal trespass as part of the deal, running concurrent with the embezzlement sentence. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, and to me personally, though realistically I knew I'd probably never see that money. The sentencing hearing was in late April. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom while Sharon stood before the judge. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her expensive clothes had been replaced by a simple dress. Her hair was pulled back in a plain ponytail. She cried as she apologized to the court, to the community, and specifically to me and the other residents she'd harmed. Judge Raymond Thompson was a no-nonsense jurist who'd clearly read all the reports. Miss Whitmore, I've reviewed the psychological evaluations, and I do believe you have genuine mental health issues that need addressing. However, you held a position of trust, and you betrayed that trust repeatedly over several years. You stole from your neighbors. You harassed elderly residents to the point of affecting their health. And when someone stood up to you, you committed a violent crime against their property. Mental illness may explain these actions, but as the victim correctly noted, it does not excuse them. He sentenced her to 8 years as agreed in the plea deal, but added mandatory mental health treatment as a condition of eventual parole. Sharon was led away in handcuffs, and I left the courthouse feeling oddly hollow. There was no satisfaction in seeing her punished, just a tired sense that justice had been done. Back in Bayshore Heights, life slowly returned to normal. The new HOA board implemented sweeping changes: financial transparency, term limits for officers, a community liaison position for residents with concerns, and a complete rewrite of the violation and fine procedures. The bogus fines were refunded to everyone affected. The insurance claim paid out, covering the embezzled funds. My house repairs were completed in mid-May. The contractors did an excellent job, and honestly, the place looked better than it had before. I'd taken the opportunity to upgrade some things. New furniture, better appliances, a security system that would alert me instantly if anyone approached the property. But I found myself spending more and more time at the marina. The house felt tainted somehow, despite the repairs and upgrades. The yacht felt like home in a way the house never quite had again. One evening in early June, I was sitting on the deck watching the sunset when I heard footsteps on the dock. I turned, half expecting more trouble, but it was Robert Chen. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" he asked. "Come aboard," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. Robert settled in with a sigh. "I wanted to thank you again. My mother is like a different person now. She's gardening again, having her friends over, living her life without constantly looking over her shoulder. You gave her that." "The board did that," I said. "You all stepped up and fixed the system. Only because you forced us to. If you just paid the bogus dues and gone away like Sharon expected, she'd still be terrorizing people. You stood your ground, and it made all the difference." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching boats come in for the evening. Finally, Robert spoke again. "The board has been talking. We'd like to offer you a position on the HOA board, the liaison position we created. Someone residents can come to with concerns about board decisions or potential violations. Someone who's not afraid to push back when we're being unreasonable." I considered it. 6 months ago, I would have laughed at the idea of joining the HOA board. But the people of Bayshore Heights had genuinely tried to make things right. They'd held Sharon accountable, implemented real reforms, and worked hard to rebuild trust. "Can I do it from here?" I asked, gesturing around the yacht. "I'll be honest, Robert. I'm probably going to sell the house. Too many bad memories, but I'd like to stay connected to the community." "I think we can make that work," Robert said with a grin. "As long as you promise to keep us honest. Deal." Over the following weeks, I put my house on the market and officially moved onto the yacht full-time. I'd always loved living on the water, and now I had no reason not to. The house sold quickly to a young family who were thrilled with the upgrades and excited to join what they'd heard was a newly revitalized community. My role as community liaison kept me busy enough. I set up regular office hours at the community center where residents could drop in with concerns. I also established an online portal where people could submit questions or complaints anonymously. Most of the issues were minor: confusion about guidelines, concerns about upcoming maintenance projects, disputes between neighbors over shared fences or trees. But occasionally, I'd get something more serious. In August, a resident named Tom Bradshaw came to me worried that the new landscape company the HOA hired was cutting corners. I investigated and found he was right. They were using cheaper materials than specified in their contract and pocketing the difference. The board terminated the contract and hired a new company, and we recovered the money through arbitration. In October, an elderly resident named Frank Martinez contacted me about suspicious activity he'd noticed during the HOA's annual reserve fund audit. He was a retired accountant and sharp as a tack, and he'd spotted what looked like inflated invoices from one of our vendors. I brought it to the board, and it turned out the vendor had been overcharging us by about 15% for 2 years. The board negotiated a settlement and switched vendors. Each time something like this came up, I was reminded of why the liaison position mattered. Not because HOA board members were inherently corrupt, but because any organization with power over people's homes and money needed oversight and accountability. Sharon Whitmore had been an extreme case, but the conditions that allowed her to operate unchecked for years were all too common in HOAs across the country. By the time December rolled around, I felt like I'd found a good rhythm. I ran the marina during the day, handled liaison duties in the evenings, and spent my free time on the water, either on my yacht or exploring the Gulf Coast on fishing trips. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I first moved to Tampa, but it was a good one. The annual HOA meeting was scheduled for December 15th. I arrived at the community center to find it packed even more than the emergency meeting back in March. But this time, the atmosphere was celebratory rather than tense. The board presented a year-end report showing the HOA's finances were in excellent shape, property values had increased, and resident satisfaction surveys were the highest they'd been in a decade. When Douglas asked me to say a few words about the liaison program, I kept it brief. This year has taught all of us some important lessons about community, accountability, and standing up for what's right. Nobody wants to be the person who complains or pushes back against authority. It's uncomfortable, but sometimes it's necessary. I'm grateful to live in a community where people are willing to speak up, where the board is willing to listen, and where we can work together to solve problems. That's what makes a neighborhood worth living in, whether you're in a house or on a boat. The crowd laughed and applauded. After the meeting, I mingled for a while, chatting with neighbors I'd gotten to know over the months. Dorothy Chen insisted I come to her Christmas dinner. The Henderson family showed me photos of their RV trip to Yellowstone, the one they'd been planning when Sharon tried to ban them from parking the RV on their property. Maria Martinez gave me a potted rose plant for my yacht's deck. As I drove back to the marina that night, I reflected on how strange the past year had been. I'd moved to Bayshore Heights looking for quiet and anonymity. Instead, I'd ended up in a battle with an HOA president, witnessed her downfall and arrest, and somehow became a community advocate. Not exactly what I'd planned, but life rarely goes according to plan. The marina was quiet when I arrived, just a few lights glowing on boats where people were living aboard or working late. I climbed onto my yacht and stood on the deck for a moment, looking out at the dark water. The Tampa Bay area had grown on me in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about the weather or the boating anymore. It was about the people I'd met, the community I'd helped protect, and the sense that I was doing something meaningful with my time and resources. My phone buzzed with an email. It was from Nicole Patterson, Sharon's attorney. The subject line read, "Client Update." I opened it hesitantly. The email was brief. Sharon had been granted permission to join a prison education program and was working toward her bachelor's degree in psychology. She was also participating in intensive therapy and had become a peer counselor for other inmates struggling with mental health issues. Nicole included a short note from Sharon herself, asking permission to send it. "Dear Yannick," it read, "I don't expect you to respond to this, but my therapist suggested I practice accountability by acknowledging the harm I caused. I destroyed your sense of security and peace in your own home. I abused the trust of an entire community. I hurt people who had done nothing wrong. No amount of apology can undo that damage. I'm working every day to understand why I did those things and to become someone who would never do them again. I hope you found peace in your life. You certainly deserve it after what I put you through. Sharon." I read it twice, then saved it in a folder with her earlier letter. I wasn't ready to respond, might never be ready, but I was glad she was getting help, glad she was trying to change. Sharon Whitmore had caused real harm, but she was still a human being, and human beings could sometimes find redemption even in the darkest circumstances. The holidays passed pleasantly. I spent Christmas Day at Dorothy Chen's house with her extended family, including Robert and his wife and kids. New Year's Eve, I hosted a party on my yacht for the marina's slip holders and their families. We watched fireworks over the bay at midnight, toasting to new beginnings and smooth sailing. In January, the Bayshore Heights HOA board approached me with an unusual request. They wanted to commission a plaque to be installed at the community center, commemorating the reforms implemented after Sharon's removal and thanking me for my role in exposing the corruption. I tried to talk them out of it. I hadn't done anything that special, but they insisted. The plaque was unveiled at the February board meeting. It read, "In recognition of the importance of accountability, transparency, and resident advocacy in homeowners associations, may we never forget that communities are strongest when members stand up for what is right, even when it's difficult." Dedicated February 2026. My name was mentioned in smaller text at the bottom, along with the names of the board members who'd implemented the reforms. I appreciated that they'd focused on the principles rather than on individuals. This wasn't about me being a hero. It was about a community learning from its mistakes and choosing to do better. Spring arrived with warm breezes and calm seas. The Marina was entering its busy season, with snowbirds returning north and locals taking advantage of perfect boating weather. I hired additional staff to handle the increased traffic and started planning some upgrades to our facilities: a new dive center, expanded parking, maybe even a small ship's chandlery. One afternoon in late March, I was in my office when Sarah knocked with an odd look on her face. I'd seen that expression before, and it usually meant something strange or difficult was about to happen. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "A woman named Patricia Summers from the HOA board." Patricia was one of the quieter board members, the one who'd inherited money and never had to work. I'd always found her pleasant enough in board meetings, though she tended to go along with whatever the majority wanted. I invited her into my office, offering coffee. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "I have a rather unusual proposition for you. I'm listening. As you know, I've been on the HOA board for almost 4 years now, but I'm planning to move. My daughter lives in North Carolina and she just had her second child. I want to be closer to my grandchildren." "That's wonderful," I said. "Congratulations." "Thank you. The thing is, I own 3 properties in Bayshore Heights. My main house, a rental property, and a vacant lot I've been holding as an investment. I'm selling the house and the vacant lot, but I'd like to keep the rental property as an income stream. However, I need someone trustworthy to manage it. Someone who understands the community and won't cut corners or ignore maintenance issues." "There are plenty of good property management companies in Tampa," I said. "I know, but I was hoping you might be interested. You already have experience managing properties through the Marina. You know Bayshore Heights better than most residents at this point, and frankly, I trust your judgment." I considered it. Property management wasn't that different from marina management in many ways: collecting rent, handling repairs, dealing with tenant issues. And it would give me another income stream while keeping me connected to Bayshore Heights even after I'd sold my house. "What kind of property is it?" I asked. "A 3-bedroom, 2-bath house on Cypress Lane. Nice yard, good neighborhood. Currently rented to a family with 2 young kids. They've been excellent tenants, always pay on time, take good care of the place. I'd want to keep them if possible." "What's the management fee you're thinking?" "Standard 10% of monthly rent, plus a small retainer for handling emergency repairs. You'd have full authority to hire contractors, handle maintenance issues, and screen potential tenants if the current ones ever leave." We negotiated the details over the next hour. By the time Patricia left, I'd agreed to take on the property management role, starting in May when she moved to North Carolina. It felt like one more thread connecting me to this community that I'd initially kept at arm's length. That evening, I stood on my yacht's deck watching the sunset and thinking about how much had changed in just over a year. I'd gone from being a reclusive tech entrepreneur who just wanted to be left alone to someone deeply involved in his community. I'd faced down a corrupt HOA president, witnessed her arrest and imprisonment, helped implement lasting reforms, and now was taking on even more responsibility in the neighborhood. My phone rang. It was Marcus, my lawyer, whom I hadn't heard from in months. "Yannick, I've got some news you'll want to hear. Sharon Whitmore's restitution payments have started coming through. The court ordered her to pay you back for the house damages, and her attorney set up a payment plan. You'll be getting about $500 a month until the full amount is paid off." "I honestly didn't think I'd see any of that money," I said. "Most victims don't. But Sharon apparently sold her house and liquidated her retirement accounts to start making payments immediately. Her attorney says she's determined to make amends in every way she can, even if it takes years." After we hung up, I thought about that. Sharon was in prison, would be there for years to come, yet she was still trying to make things right. It didn't change what she'd done, but it suggested she was genuinely working to become a better person. That counted for something. Summer rolled around, bringing hot days and afternoon thunderstorms that were as reliable as clockwork. The Marina hummed with activity: fishing charters, sunset cruises, families taking their boats out for weekend adventures. I hired 2 more staff members to keep up with demand, and started seriously planning the expansion I'd been considering. The property management work turned out to be easier than I'd expected. The tenants were indeed excellent, requiring almost no oversight. I checked in with them monthly, handled a few minor repairs, and otherwise let them live their lives. Patricia called from North Carolina every few weeks to check in, but mostly she just thanked me for giving her peace of mind. In August, Douglas Pemberton approached me about running for HOA president. His term was ending, and he thought I'd be perfect for the role. "I appreciate the confidence," I told him, "but I don't think that's the right fit. I'm better as the liaison, the person who can push back against the board when needed. If I'm the president, I lose that independent voice." "That's fair," Douglas agreed. "Who would you suggest?" "Robert Chen. He's thoughtful, he listens to residents, and he's seen firsthand what happens when HOA power goes unchecked. He'd be great." Robert was indeed elected president in September, with Linda Kaufman continuing as treasurer and Timothy Vance as secretary. They asked me to continue as community liaison, and I agreed. The system was working well, and I saw no reason to change it. That fall, something interesting happened at the Marina. A young couple approached me about living aboard their boat full-time. They were both remote workers, tired of high rent, and wanted to try the live-aboard lifestyle. I'd never really promoted Harborview as a live-aboard marina, but I saw no reason not to allow it if someone wanted to. Within 3 months, I had 5 boats with full-time live-aboards. It changed the feel of the marina in a good way: more activity in the evenings, a greater sense of community, people looking out for each other's boats. I started thinking about marketing Harborview as Tampa Bay's premier live-aboard-friendly marina. By the time the 2nd anniversary of Sharon's arrest rolled around in December, Bayshore Heights had fully transformed. Property values had increased by an average of 15%. The community had won an award from the county for Best Managed HOA. Resident turnover was down, satisfaction was up, and people actually seemed to enjoy living there rather than constantly stressing about violation notices and arbitrary fines. I attended the anniversary HOA meeting, where Robert Chen gave a presentation on everything that had changed. New financial controls had caught 2 attempted cases of vendor fraud before any money was lost. The appeals process had resolved several disputes fairly. The Community Liaison Program had handled over 200 resident concerns, most of them minor but important to the people involved. "We learned some hard lessons," Robert said to the assembled residents. "We learned that HOAs aren't inherently bad, but they require constant vigilance. We learned that rules without accountability become tyranny. Most importantly, we learned that when good people stand up and demand better, real change is possible." He turned to me. "Yannick, would you like to add anything?" I stood, feeling a bit self-conscious. "Just this. What happened here wasn't special. HOAs across America face similar issues every day. The difference is whether people are willing to speak up and whether boards are willing to listen. We got lucky that the board here chose to listen. Not every community is so fortunate. If you take anything from our experience, let it be this: question authority when something doesn't feel right, demand transparency in financial matters, and never let anyone tell you that rules matter more than people. Communities exist to serve their residents, not the other way around." The applause was generous. After the meeting, I stayed to chat with neighbors who'd become friends over the past 2 years. Dorothy Chen gave me a Christmas card with a photo of her tending her butterfly garden, looking happy and relaxed. The Henderson family showed me their plans for their next RV adventure. Maria Martinez's roses were thriving, and she'd started a community garden program that had brought residents together in wonderful ways. Driving back to the Marina that night, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I'd moved to Tampa looking for a place to enjoy my boats and my privacy. Instead, I'd found a community worth fighting for, people worth standing up for, and a purpose I hadn't known I was missing. The yacht welcomed me home like it always did, gently rocking in its slip. I climbed aboard and poured myself a drink, settling into my favorite chair on the deck. The Tampa Bay lights sparkled across the water. Boats swayed peacefully in their slips, and somewhere in the distance I could hear laughter from a group of livia-boards having dinner together on one of their boats. This was home. Not the house I'd sold, not the property I managed for Patricia, but this, the yacht, the marina, the water, the community I'd helped build both here and in Bayshore Heights. I'd fought an HOA and won, not through legal tricks or financial leverage, but by standing up for what was right and refusing to back down even when it was difficult. Sharon Whitmore would spend years in prison paying for her crimes. The residents of Bayshore Heights would continue building a community based on trust and accountability, rather than fear and control. And I would keep doing what I did, managing the marina, serving as community liaison, helping people navigate the complex relationship between personal freedom and community responsibility. My phone buzzed with an email. It was from Nicole Patterson, Sharon's attorney, with another update. Sharon had earned her bachelor's degree and was starting work on a master's in counseling psychology. She'd been granted early parole review due to good behavior and substantial progress in her mental health treatment. The hearing would be in 6 months. Nicole's email ended with a question. If Sharon is granted parole, would you be willing to provide a statement to the parole board about her rehabilitation? I know this is a big ask given your history, but she's genuinely changed. Whatever you decide, thank you for reading this. I stared at the email for a long time. Sharon had destroyed my sense of safety, cost me thousands of dollars, and caused real harm to an entire community. She'd earned every day of her prison sentence, but she was also doing the work. Real work, hard work, to understand her issues and become a better person. She was paying restitution. She was helping other inmates. She was earning a degree that would let her help people rather than harm them. Wasn't that what accountability was supposed to be about? Not just punishment, but rehabilitation. Not just making people pay for their mistakes, but helping them become capable of doing better. I hit reply and started typing. Miss Patterson, I'll attend the parole hearing and speak honestly about what Sharon did and the impact it had on me and my community. I'll also speak honestly about the restitution payments I've received and what I understand of her rehabilitation efforts. I can't promise it will help her case, but I won't oppose parole if the board believes she's truly changed. That said, I hope any parole conditions include ongoing mental health treatment and community service. She needs to help rebuild what she damaged. Best regards, Yannick Ellis. I sent the email and set down my phone. Whatever happened at Sharon's parole hearing was out of my hands now. I'd done what I thought was right, acknowledging both the harm she'd caused and the efforts she'd made to change. That was all anyone could ask. The night was warm, the water calm, the stars bright overhead despite Tampa's light pollution. Tomorrow I'd wake up and run my Marina, check in with my property management tenants, handle whatever concerns came up in my liaison role. I'd live my life on my boat, surrounded by water and community and purpose, and if an HOA ever tried to mess with me again, well, I'd learned a thing or two about standing my ground. Sometimes the best defense is simply refusing to be pushed around, demanding accountability, and reminding people in power that they serve the community, not rule it. The yacht rocked gently beneath me as I finished my drink and headed inside. Home, strange as the journey had been to get here, was exactly where I wanted to be.